I think it's important to look at the US for two reasons. One, because of course the US has cultural hegemony, and a lot of the time when you hear conversations about
Yes.
marriage and dating, you talk about it in the US context, but also to try to give a bit of hope to people in the UK and Europe, because it's not as bad. It's still quite bad. I've spoken to George, a gentleman who runs an Instagram account called the Tin Men, working on UK men's advocacy, and he's highlighted how fathers essentially have no legal rights thanks to a bunch of Labour MPs like
Mhm.
Harriet Harman, but it's nowhere near as bad as in the US. But I wanted to break down these statistics a little bit, run it past you, especially as a mathematician, and get your response to some of this. So, as people can
Sure.
see in the description on the screen, here, so they've gone through the stats, and some of the ones that jump out at me were that half of all first marriages end in divorce, 67% of second marriages end in divorce, and
Hmm.
73% of third marriages end in divorce. So
Hmm.
beyond the first marriage, it seems certainly like there are a bunch of dysfunctional people repeatedly remarrying, and they're the common denominator in why these marriages break
Yes.
down. The average length of a marriage prior to divorce is about 8 years. 75% of individuals and couples cited lack of commitment as the reason for their divorce. 60% cited infidelity. Only 24% cite domestic abuse. 45% cited getting married too young as the reason for divorcing. So I think it's pretty clear here that no fault divorce is the runaway factor in
Agreed.
why so many couples are splitting up. When was no fault divorce passed in America, by the way? Because in the UK it's fairly recent.
In 1979, and then the Title 4D laws took effect in 1982,
Right.
which essentially financially incentivized the states to exploit the no fault divorce laws to maximize the number of divorces.
Right, yes, because I remember you speaking about this in another interview. There's a very profitable industry of divorce attorneys in
Mm.
pretty much every state, if I'm right. Do you know the sort of annual turnover for that?
Well, in Dallas County. Dallas County has more divorces than anywhere in the United States. You're in the divorce. If you visit here, you'll be in the divorce capital, probably of the world, actually. In Texas, divorce is almost $1 billion industry for attorney's fees. But Title 4D goes much further than just attorney's fees. Title 4D actually gives reimbursements to the states for collecting child support. So the more child support that's issued and the more child support that is actually claimed and actually paid, the states get massive subsidies. Now in Texas, it's about $480 million. So that's why in the 1980s there was a big shift. In the United States, we don't pay child support to the mother. We have to pay the state the child support, who then disperses the money to the mother. That way they can prove that the money was collected to the federal government in order to get these subsidies. So it's $500 million almost in the state of Texas. It funds the entire Texas Attorney General's office. And judges in Texas are actually given quotas for child support before seeing any facts in any cases. They're given quotas for child support in order to maximize Title 4D. We actually have a statute, and most states do, which says that the family courts will always rule so as to maximize Title 4D reimbursements to the state. It doesn't, and that was passed after the law saying that the court should always rule in the best interest of the child. So post law always takes precedent over prior law because it's considered that the legislature understood the law prior to it. And so the Title IV defunding takes a precedent even over the best interest of the child in family courts. They're essentially a commission making mechanism for the state. And when you give a state a $500 million incentive to break up a family and to make sure that one parent gets 8 days a month, because that means that parent will pay child support, you're never going to get 50-50 custody and divorce. It just will never happen because the states get paid not to do it.
Right, so the state has a perverse financial incentive to not only act as the middleman between divorces, but
Mm,
also to
that's
increase
right.
the number of divorces by making the laws
Mhm.
flexible enough to make the family fragile enough,
That's
and
right.
then dangle finances like baubles in the faces of women who are more likely
Mhm.
to file first to leave their husbands to treat them like tax cattle.
That's exactly right.
Right, and
And that's
people
what
wonder
happens.
why this happens a lot, I suppose.
Yeah. It's all about it's really all about incentives. It's one of the reasons you'll never find me on like a lot of these red pill guys. I mean, there's two kinds that we can talk about. There's two kinds of the red pill movement. There's two sides of it. But both of them often descend into kind of a woman bashing, and you'll never find me doing that. For example, I love Katie Faust very much.
Mm.
Um, What I'm trying to do is simply change the incentives. If you gave men the same incentives that women have to divorce, men would be divorcing at 75% rates, right? It's the incentives that are the problem. It's not really the people, and because the people essentially haven't changed since when divorce was almost non-existent, right? What's changed are the incentives and the laws, and that's what I focus on, is changing those incentives.
Yeah, you sent me, I've linked them down in the description, a study and the reply titled Amusingly
Mhm.
These Boots Are Made for Walking. Perversely amusingly, I
Yes.
suppose. And it confirmed most of my prior suspicions, which is that if you file first, you're more likely to get favorable treatment by the courts,
Yep.
particularly in regards to custody battles. Therefore, the
Yes.
financial incentives and the family court incentives to get easier custody of the children cause
Mhm.
more women to file first, as well as women being typically more predisposed to being neurotic, more sensitive to negative emotion, therefore more likely to act on a perceived problem than the men who might just stick it
Wow.
out for the sake of the relationship.
Well, very few people that I've been interviewed by are willing to say that so plainly, and it's one of the most well-established psychological facts about sex differences, psychological sex differences. But yeah, the person who files first has a huge advantage in family court because they get to tell the story first, and the other person is always behind the scenes. Now, I refused to file for divorce because of my religious beliefs. Even after my divorce was final and she was abusing my son for 3 years, I still attempted to get her to remarry, so that we could raise our children together. Um, and that was, of course, unsuccessful. But the person who files first has such an advantage, and plus, women have an advantage for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of old biases about the tender years doctrine. Um, there's the Title IV-D incentives. Courts know very well that when they assign child support to mothers, they can almost never collect it. In Texas, the child support default rates for mothers are over 70%. And so they won't get that. And it's also explains something else you see in family court. Typically, the court will almost always give primary custody to the dysfunctional parent. And that seems so counterintuitive to people because you think of the courts as trying to take care of the kids. But actually, what they're trying to do is maximize the financial return of the divorce. And they know that the dysfunctional parent will never pay the child support. They'll never get the collection rates that they need to get the government reimbursements. So they give the child to the dysfunctional parent because they know the functional parent will actually take care of their child and pay the child support. And so there's perverse incentives to harm the children here too.
It's like the principle of
It's
anarcho tyranny,
disturbing.
except applied to the family, where they know
It
that.
is exactly our anarcho tyranny.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. So just
It's
quick thing
exactly
as
what
well,
it is.
because as far as I know, the tender years doctrine, which for UK viewers, it's for the
Mm.
first 7 years, the presumption is that the mother gets full
Yes.
custody rights because the
Yes.
child is best raised solely by their mother in a divorce. That was the belief, and
Yes.
wasn't there was another thing called maternal presumption as well, which I'm a little bit foggy on. Both of those got repealed, but if they're not de jure in law, they're sort of de facto operated on. Is that right?
They are. And one of the big issues with them is after those 7 years are up, let's say it's correct. It's not correct. All information now shows there's an international consensus that it is not true. The children benefit from equal contact from both parents. But even if it was true, what happens is a presumption for the mother as the primary parent has a 7-year basis now. And courts are loath to change the situation of the children. And so effectively, fathers are just permanently shut out of their kids' lives 8 days a month. And, it's pretty clear that a father cannot inculcate his values, cannot pass on his values to his children when it's 8 days a month. Moreover, I think we need to think about some of the awful things that happen. I have a friend of mine in Houston, Texas, and his wife divorced him. She got primary custody, and she converted his Christian children to Islam. And there's just absolutely nothing he can do about that. So this happens all the time where children are raised in values completely contrary to the father's values. And in fact, in that case, there was a stepfather who was a Muslim. And this stepfather was given complete and unfettered access to the children, whereas biological fathers in family court have to jump through all kinds of hoops and go through psychological evaluations to see their own children. So one of the easiest ways to see the real rationale of the system is that stepfathers have no scrutiny, but biological fathers have enormous scrutiny.
Yeah, and according to all the available data that we have, especially what's been included in Casey's books as well, to keep raising her, we know that the most likely scenario where a child will be abused is with a non-biologically related male in the home of a single mother. So if you truly were worried as a court about the best well-being of a child, you wouldn't place them solely with a single mother without any vetting requirements on the carousel of boyfriends that get admitted to the home. So that's a
That's
really
right.
valuable point.
It's really important to understand that, and there's been a lot of attempts in Texas and in other states that I'm aware of here in the United States to create common law precedents against this idea that fathers are the best, the biological father is the best caretaker. There was a case in my county, Denton County. It's actually the judge that has Stephen Crowder's case. Her name is Claire Shipman. Claire Shipman, I believe, colluded with a law firm called the Wasaki law firm. They really wanted to get a precedent for gay parents that non-biological parents should be given visitation rights. So they finally found a perfect case in Denton County where a man had gotten a divorce. It was an affair. The woman moved out of the house, got primary custody of the children, and was living with the man who she had the affair with, the man who broke the marriage up. She was involved in a tragic car accident 6 months later. And the judge gave the boyfriend who broke up the marriage visitation rights over this man's child. Now, fortunately, this case went to the Supreme Court of Texas, and the Supreme Court of Texas said this is insane, don't do this. But there's a whole legal movement to create visitation rights for non-biological, quote unquote, parents. And you see this even in Texas. And believe me, that's coming to Europe.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me, especially with the way the surrogacy industry is going, which is something I want to get
Yes.
onto later. I mean, so this is a minor detour then, because you might be more familiar with the facts of the case than I am. I haven't mentioned Stephen Crowder's divorce on either our show or my show behind the paywall because I don't really get into interpersonal drama. But one thing
Right.
that did raise my eyebrow was the ancillary discourse that was going on with people I respect, mainly Tim Pool and Lauren Southern, sort of arguing on Twitter about the fact that, as you've already mentioned, about the fact that you had to pay your ex-wife's legal fees, that Stephen has to pay, I think, $25,000 a month to his ex-wife Hillary in order to pay for the lawsuit that he's bringing against her. Is that Texas law based on the presumption that the wife wouldn't be earning while she's being divorced?
Yep, and that's true in all the 50 states. Judges are allowed to assign attorney's fees however they want. There's actually no legal guidance on how it should be done. Texas is actually better than most states in that it establishes a presumption that parties should pay their own lawyers, and that has to be given a preponderance of the evidence standard in order to break that. But I think $25,000 a month is pretty excessive for legal fees, if you think about that. And I think the judge is doing something quite different there, and I think everybody knows it.
I think it's also because the business is involved as far as I'm aware, so it might be a penalty both against Stephen personally and the business. So again,
Yes.
I don't want to wade into their personal lives, but it has
Also,
drawn attention to how unfair it is.
yeah, it also benefits the legal cartel. I don't know how it is in the UK. You have a barrister system. We intentionally got rid of that. I'm not sure that was a good idea. I've come around to, I think, the UK point of view on this. But in America, we have a private organization we call the bar. And in order to be a licensed lawyer, a licensed attorney, the way in our parlance, a lawyer is an expert in the law. That doesn't mean that you have a judicial degree. Anybody who's an expert in the law can be a lawyer. But an attorney is someone who's licensed to represent other people at law. So to be a licensed attorney, you have to be a member of this private organization called the bar. So the bar effectively controls licensure of attorneys in the states. Now that's different than any other profession. We have a Texas medical board That's a board that's composed of citizens, doctors that are appointed by the governor, and doctors that are appointed by the legislature. And so it's a government body that administers the medical profession. But in the bar is quite different. It's a private organization that administers the profession on behalf of the government. And the relationship of the bar to the state is quite unique. No other organization has this relationship. And it allows the establishment of an effective cartel. So a lot of times legal fees are assigned in such a way as to maximize the returns to the lawyers involved. And the underhanded way of dealing with this is that the lawyers will then donate to the political campaigns of the judges who are elected.
Right. Yes, understood.
So in my case, for example, Bloody Mary Brown, the platinum donor that actually ran fundraising for her campaign was my opposing counsel for me. And this is perfectly legal in the states. The bar has gotten laws passed which do not make a basis for recusal political donations by lawyers who argue before the court. And so judges are routinely bought in family court. They're routinely bought in family court.
Yeah, well, as I was listening to again Tim's show where he was talking about Crowder's case, for example, and one of the women on there had sued Taylor Lorenz, the disreputable journalist from the Washington Post, for making up just false claims against her talent agency. And she found out that a rival talent agency was working with a journalist by the name of Yashar Ali, who was the man that leaked the Ring doorbell footage of Steven Crowder, where we can all say it wasn't him at his best moment for sure. So there's clearly, and obviously the legal firms hire these PR campaigns to, especially in high profile divorce cases, smear the party they think they can get the most money out of. So I can see there's a whole network of financial perverse incentives at work here.
Yeah, there is. And, you can talk about the law all day, but here's how a family court actually works. Judges in family court look at two factors, really. In reality, I'm not talking about at law. They'll make up a legal case to justify it, but it's parallel case construction. They actually do one thing and then they justify it with the law on the other. What they actually do is they go, okay, this kid is in this situation. If I was the parent, what would I do? That's what I'm going to make the parents do. That's actually what the judges do. The second thing they ask is, who is the troublemaker here? Who is the person that is going to force me to hear this stupid case over and over and over again in the future? Who is the one that's going to appeal the case if their rights are violated? That person is not going to get the kids, and I'm going to only allow access to the children as long as they obey me and don't come after me in the appellate courts. That's how it actually works in family court. They only look at two things. One, how would I raise the kid? And the judge is going to make you raise the kid the way they would. They're just going to make you do all the work and pay for it. And secondly, they ask, who's the troublemaker that could cause me trouble in the appellate courts? And I'm going to use their kids to prevent them from taking action.
Thank you for watching that clip from Tomlinson Talks. If you liked that and you would like to see more, you can get the full 90-minute show every week on a Wednesday afternoon, live from 3 p.m., only on lotuseaters.com, and all of the other content that my colleagues produce behind the paywall for as little as £5 a month. Thank you very much for supporting us, and I hope to see you there. Until next time, goodbye.